We will now be passing the mic to our moderator, Andreas Zenofotos, who will introduce our next guest speakers.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andreas, originally from Cyprus. I'm a proud Greek Cypriot. I would be moderating the second panel, Building Stronger Skills and Habits. We'll focus on strategies to cultivate positive professional identity and changes and challenges. I would like to invite Pamela Karavas and Nemi Kalogeropoulos as panelists. Thank you. We'll start a little bit differently, meaning I have a question for you guys. How do we detect lies? Okay, we're gonna have a one truth and one lie concept from our panelists to answer this question. And then after every panelist ends, we'll kind of vote. What do you think was the truth and the lie?
Do I start?
You can, yes.
Am I supposed to be the expert?
I guess, yeah, maybe.
Right. Short story first, and then two more stories. 2018, I was in Boston, and I was presenting at the Institute of Coaching, Harvard Medical School. I was presenting a research paper on how to detect lies during a coaching session. Now, I'm looking at each and every one of you, not because I'm an FBI person, but because I was trained with the FBI to detect lies that people tell to themselves, first and foremost, especially during coaching sessions, imagine in therapy, and how we as coaches can make an effective comeback without offending our clients. Now, having said that, we are going to tell deliberate lies, aren't we?
Yes.
We are. So, two stories. Which is the truth and which is the lie? When I was young and we had set up the farm back in Greece, there was a guy on a motorbike and he came through the farm and the rest of the siblings didn't stand up or say anything. I just ran out of the house and I said, "Oi, what are you doing there?" Australian, okay? There you go. Now, the other story is I was on a TV panel and we had this very aggressive TV journalist. Some of you might know her. And she came at me, "You're a coach?" I says, "Yeah." "What is this new science, this thing? Is this a very American thing?" And I was like, no, Socrates. And she goes like, "Don't put Socrates in your mouth." And I told to her on TV, live TV, "Well, you can put your mouth where, you know, whatever, ... And she just looked at me in shock. People congratulated me after that. So, which is the true story and which is the false story? The gentleman back there.
The first one's the lie, the second one's the truth.
Interesting. Anybody else? I see people nodding, but I want answers. Yeah?
I think it's the second one because you referred to us in knowing this person. So to try to relate to us, I think that you were coaxing us into believing the story. But I think that one is the lie.
Interesting. Yes?
I find it hard to believe that you said that on live TV. So I would say that the second one is the lie.
Anybody else? The ladies here? You're nodding, but responses? True or lie? Which one's the story that's... Jerry?
I thought the first one was a lie. Distancing language.
Well, I had really great training in detecting lies and telling lies, to be honest with you. So, let me put it this way. The first one is a true story from my childhood. I was the one that actually set boundaries, and I wanted to set boundaries and say, you know, who's in here? Okay, who's coming on our farm? The second story, for those who said is a lie, it's a lie, but for a different reason. Half of it is true. I actually did engage with her really intensely, live on TV. I just didn't tell her to put, you know what, ... Okay, but I did tell her, and I stood my ground. Okay, it's in Greek, it's on my Facebook page, but I didn't tell her that, okay? But half of the story is true, okay? So you should always remember boundaries. I gave you the story to tell you how I set boundaries in my personal life as a kid and then as an adult. I wouldn't take it even though she was famous, she still is famous. I didn't take it from her. I set boundaries on TV, but in a different way, not that way. Okay? Good. Amy, your turn.
My turn. I'm not sharing stories. I'm going to give you statements. So I've built my career on consistency, systems, routines, and showing up even when I didn't feel like it. I thrive naturally in uncertainty, and I come up with a clear plan. Which one's the truth? Which one's the lie?
One is true.
You think one is true? You in the back?
So based on how you present yourself, I'd like to believe that the first one is true, but the second one is a more gut character. So I think in both there's truth, but I think the first one is true.
The real truth.
The second one is slightly false.
Okay. Anybody else? Well, how about two more? And then I'll share which one's true.
You said you thrive on uncertainty, and then you said you always have a clear plan. So I think that
I always come up with a clear plan.
Yeah, since you thrive on uncertainty, sometimes you might not always have a clear plan.
All right, final answer. The first one is the true one. I'm a builder by natural. It comes naturally to me. I don't like uncertainty. However, I can read a room, and when I need to, can come up with a plan. But I do not thrive in it. I like to have control.
I'm not good with control.
Well, I was going to say the second one was true because I've only met you a few times, and I wouldn't be surprised if you said that on live.
I have no notes. I take it as it comes. You see, that's how it happens with me.
Thank you for this a little bit different intro question, but that gave us a floor to get into, connected back to the takeaways of our symposium. Kind of the first question connects telos and pathos. So both of your career, whether it's coaching executives or community-driven nonprofits, are built around serving others. When did you feel on your past jobs you become too quiet for your passion? And then how do you build new skills to reinvent yourself? Amy, do you want to go first?
Sure. I've learned that for myself, when the work starts to feel like it's too quiet for my level of energy and contribution, not in terms of the volume of work, but in the opportunities for growth and impact, then I do feel it's time to move on. I've done what I can. That doesn't speak to the organization and that they're not still doing good things. It just means that I'm no longer being stretched in that role. Early on in my career, I recognized where there were systems not in place when I started in education, and I carried that through me when I went to the Disability, a grassroots nonprofit that had recently received a federal grant from the state of Massachusetts. And so systems needed to be in place. You can't just have your passion to solve the problem at hand. You also need to have these systems to report back to the federal government. And therefore, what I was able to bring there has allowed them to continue with sustainability and funding, which is actually a program that they're still doing. So even at my most recent role, I started to feel that shift again. I learned a lot, I built a lot, but I also knew I had more to give, especially when it came to areas like strategy, innovation, and growth. But I was allowed to do, I wasn't allowed to do more in that particular role. I just reached the edge of what I could do in that environment. And so what I've learned is that, can you repeat the second half of the question again?
Yeah, sure. And the second one is, how do you build those new skills to reinvent yourself when there is that transition to your passion?
I take the audience along with me. For instance, even for an engagement like today, I'm not leaving a gap where I'm quiet. So I'm a naturally a loud person and have a presence because I show up consistently in each room that I'm in any type of environment, whether it's work, whether it's with my friends or with my family. And therefore, right now, I'm taking the audience along. So there is not a period of, the credibility stays because I'm not going quiet. So it's sharing the transition as it's evolving.
My turn. So I'm continuing with what Amy said about being a loud person. I used to be louder than everyone in the room, okay? And personal joke, my dad used to call me the foghorn. You know why? I had a very, very loud voice. I still do. I just choose not to use it the way I used to use it. In that way, I don't like when the people become quiet because of the environment. So my first job was as a teacher of English for children, and I had a private language school. So I'm very, very accustomed to the youth, and I always tried to help them. And I had nasty parents coming in, and I had amazing children being there. And I always wanted to help the young children and the teenagers, and I became well known as the teacher who didn't have children but could understand the children very, very well, especially teenagers. And then I became a teenage coach, but at a much later stage. And seeing the parents, the adults, behaving in a particular way, I started teaching my students the English language by using songs, for example. And one of the songs that I taught them, the lyrics was by Jennifer Lopez, Let's Get Loud. Why did I do that? Naturally, because I wanted to teach them to become loud, not to become another Pamela, but for them to find their voice. And I always had my voice. Remember, I spoke before about boundaries. I think I was born like that. So let's get loud means to understand who you are. And I always had that as my core value. Whatever I did, I had to become loud. I had to have a voice for me and for others around them. I know that because it has to do with one of my sisters. I had to protect her as well. So I didn't like quiet. And I moved on when I felt that it was not for me. Jerry said before about alignment. I am a businesswoman. I have my own business. I don't rely on anyone apart from my clients, and I have to satisfy my clients. So my business relies on me being able to align with what I believe in. And one of the key words was, when I was working with the Dutch embassy in Greece, pivot. All the startups have to pivot. My business had to pivot. Whenever people tried to silence me, I had to pivot. I have to speak up. I had to sue someone. I had to protect my reputation. You know what they say, it takes a lifetime to build a reputation, 15 minutes only to destroy it. Okay? So you always have to remember when to pivot and how to protect your values and your reputation. So I had to build skills. I don't take any audience with me, but I use every source of knowledge that I can find. Now, you know who was famous for their curiosity. I'm asking the audience now, taking the audience with me eventually. So, who was a person well known for their curiosity?
Socrates?
Kinda, yeah. Well, he just pushed us really hard to understand ourselves, but after Socrates, not back that much back. Who was it? Famous for the curiosity. I know you know your history, guys. I know you do. Yes?
Hello?
Come towards, leave Greece alone for a minute. Yeah? No?
St. Thomas Aquinas?
No?
Marcus Aurelius?
That direction.
Seneca?
Further?
Diogenes?
No, you were right, quite right in Italy, that way. I said it. Come on, Italy, somebody? Curiosity? Gee, the audience is tough. Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci was known as the person who embraced curiosity to such an extent that he became the person he became. It's like he was the one that built the machines back then. Why? Because he was curious. Why do birds fly? Why can't man fly? Okay, so he started creating things. Speaking of creativity with Nico earlier, he was the first influencer, creative, person back then. So curiosity has to be inside us if we literally want to build skills and build habits. If you don't have a genuine sense of curiosity, it ain't happening for you. So you got to ask yourselves, am I curious enough to move forward and be able to pivot? And that's how I moved on.
I keep thinking of hearing Ross on Friends. Pivot.
Oh, really? Well, it's the number one word for startups. That's what we always said. Yeah, you have to pivot. Yep.
Can you give an example of a pivot instead of traits?
Right. Interesting. Good. So I started out becoming a coach. I set up the business to be a coach. And then there were no clients when I was back in Greece, trying to set up the coaching environment in Greece. I'm talking way back. I'm one of the oldest coaches, like 2009, 16 years ago. And there were no clients coming. Why? Because nobody knew. I had set up everything, the marketing, the branding. Oh, I was so happy and proud of myself. I was a new coach. Nobody came. Nobody knew what coaching was back in Greece. And then the pivot came. Why? Because somebody, my mentor, Dutch mentor, he said to me, you've been a teacher for 20 years. You just discovered coaching. Put those two together. I still couldn't get it. My brain couldn't go that. You're like, what can I do? And he said, it's very simple, Pam. You teach people. You're great at teaching. You know all about coaching. Put them together. I set up the first, coaching academy in Greece, and I made loads of money. There was no other coaching academy in Greece. I just hadn't thought of it. I thought, oh, the big money would come if I, knock on the doors of companies. Didn't happen that way. I thought I was done with teaching. As I said earlier, I moved on. No, I had to pivot. And then when a lot more academies popped up in Greece and everybody was offering coaching courses for a fraction of the cost that I was offering the courses, I said, Pam, it's time to leave. So I set up the academy in the UK. So now I have a UK incorporated company, and I just work with people in the UK and the US. So once more, I had to leave everything behind, start from scratch, and all I say is just just go on to the next one, move on to the next goal. Okay, Jay-Z said, on to the next one in one of his songs, The Blueprint. There you go, on to the next one, on to the next one. That's my motto. I follow Jay-Z and Beyonce.
Thank you for that. I'll go to the next question there.
On to the next one.
Yes, perfect. We're going to connect Keros and ethos with kind of consistency and adaptability. There is always this tension of trying to stay consistent to your core message that we touched a little bit here, and adapting to the moment, to the room, to the audience that's in front of you. How do you hold both at the same time if you can? Maybe it's not the case. And how do you make sure you adapt as it showing in a genuine, not performative way?
For me, it comes down to having a really clear personal code. My values don't change even if the situation does. I stay consistent in what I stand for and how I show up, but I adapt to how I deliver it. So that's where reading the room comes in, understanding the audience, the moment, the tone, and then it allows it for people to feel that it's genuine, because it is. I'm not changing the message, I'm just translating it. And your message can always flex, but your standards shouldn't. And that's how I consistently show up when it comes to that. Final answer.
It's very important, isn't it? To have, your sense of worth through your own values. It's very important. And sometimes you have to understand that it's not as straightforward, and you have to look deep through the forest to find the values. One of the questions that I ask my clients is what are your own standards? And the majority of people don't know the answer to this question. It's a very simple question, and I want you to consider it. What are your own standards? Because if you want to be respected, you have to use language. Me being a TEDx speaker coach as well, I always told them, use language that shows what you value. And don't use ChatGPT to discover that language. It's not going to be your language. So your values language is a foreign language to the majority of people. And that's why the majority of the presidents and the ministers and the politicians have other people writing their speeches for them. And that's why they can't deliver them honestly and authentically, as you were saying, Jerry, earlier. You have to be quite the person you are saying you are, to use language that people are going to believe in and believe that it's true. Now, I'm not going to reply just for me, because as I said before, I had to sue people to be able to stand my ground. And it was like, I'm going to scare you with this one. I sued 9 of my students. Why? Because my reputation was at stake back then. Because they said something that was not true, and they decided to destroy my business. Speaking of pivot, okay, you have to know when to stand your ground. Kept the academy open. It kept going really well, but I had to sue people. And that's part of my value system. I took a very tough decision. I became known as Maleficent and the woman who sues people. I don't care, because I stood my ground. Fair enough, if somebody, completes the academy, or if somebody, does something with me, they know that they can coach, for example. But I'm going to give you a different story right now. Who here has read Alexis Orbas by Nikos Kazantzakis? One. Why one? Who's read it? 2. Okay. Gosh, you 2, 3. We've got just 3 people in the crowd. Right. Now, in some part of the book, it says that Alexis Orbas went back to Madame Hortense, the courtesan of the village. The courtesan of the village was old, but Alexis Orbas would always go back to her, not because of the sex thing. He would always go back to her and hug her and keep her in his arms. She was old, not as beautiful as she used to be. But Alexis went back because he would appreciate the past. He would always tell her, don't say how ugly you are now. You once used to be so beautiful. And Kazantzakis describes her as this old but once beautiful woman. So here we have appreciation of beauty. Here we have appreciation of the past. And he would always say, I go back, not because I want to have fun with her, but because I want to appreciate a full life. That's you, the youth, and the older ones in here. Appreciate life, the good one and the bad one. That's what Aristotle teaches us, to understand and appreciate beauty in life as well. So full life, even if it is a full catastrophe, you have to embrace it. So no matter what goes wrong, you embrace it, and that's how you can pivot. And he would also hold her in his arms because he would show compassion for her loneliness. Why? Because our damn society is so harsh. And you know that. We spoke about cancel society right now. What is that? Where did that come from? Since when? Since when do we not care about others? Since forever, I will say. And Alexis Orbas knew about canceling. And he would hold her and he would show compassion for her loneliness because the rest of the men in the village would treat her as a courtesan that was nobody. But he would call her Madame Hortense and my love. He would give her joy by holding her and showing compassion. And these are the values that I would like you to remember. And do read Kazantzakis. Interesting guy.
Based on that, I would like to engage the audience once more time. So I will ask everyone to get up, stand up, kind of shake your shoulders a little bit, stretch, left, right, take that fear, that anxiety to think on your toes. And then we have 30 seconds. I want you to turn left or right, depending on where you're at, and share one core value on the spot you have for yourself, to someone. Maybe you know the one next to you, maybe you don't, but 30 seconds, I want you to share that.
Share a value, guys. Share your standards.
I have one more question before we go to our final questions, because the title of these panels also touches a little bit on habit. We talked a lot about identity and purpose, but we want to talk a little bit about skills and habits. So let's get a little bit concrete. What is one daily, maybe weekly practice that has most helped your professional brand or your career so far? It's not like under a mindset or an actual behavior. And how did you build it? How long did it take, and so on? Feel free to share whatever you want.
I would say my skill set or the habit that I built is that, as I said earlier, I am a builder. Operational excellence, it comes naturally. I've always asking how something can work better, not that it's not working. I built it early on by learning to work smarter and instead of harder. That's what I always like to say. And it's how I operate every single day, in anything that I approach. Before coming to speak, I was trying to think of a story that I can give you a concrete example. I don't know how many years ago this was. I was born in Worcester, Mass. My parents have a half-brick colonial home. It's not easy to do things. My mother loves Christmas lights. So every year my father would struggle to put a wreath above the front door outside of the bathroom windows. He's had his employees come, hang out the window, get the ladder. And one day I just looked at it and I said, why don't you throw a rope down from the window and just lift it up and hook it onto the nail? And my dad looked at me and he said something a little off color in Greek, but not in a joking way. And I said, see, Dad, over $100,000 in college tuition. And I was able to solve an everyday problem for holiday decorations. So that's I naturally can look at something and just see how it can function better.
You know what Aristotle said about excellence and habits, and you know the book that became a bestseller about, atomic habits or something? Has anybody read that book? Yeah? Okay. I haven't. I don't like it. So, okay, to make it short and sweet, I've got ADD, and that means I don't do well with habits. However, everybody tells me that I'm highly organized somehow. All right, the secret is my dad's magic word, and that is discipline. And I can't have that thing, in my head and not be respectful to my father, who's the total opposite of me. He shows so much discipline in everything that he does. And guys, I just told myself, you got to have discipline no matter what. There's only one thing that ADD doesn't help me do, and that's being on time. But the rest of my life, I've managed to fight my nature. And even though I thrive under uncertainty, my favorite word is anti-fragility. For those who don't know it, you can ask me, later on. Anti-fragility, I thrive on that. But discipline and being proud of what I have achieved, being proud of my ability, the way I think, is what helps me build skills and habits despite my nature going against it. So be proud of yourselves, and always remember, I'll end with this very, very small thing. I saw the F1 movie because I love Formula One on the plane on the way here from Greece, and Brad Pitt says it's not about the money. He says, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So make that your habit so you can achieve things faster and better. And with that, I think we're done.
We are done. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to the audience for engaging as well. Thank you, guys.